discussion that has been generally related to the local ordinance. We can start in the corner. We'll start with Mr. Sheehan, so you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the contingency part, so this is what this is to the finance director. It says operating transferring out on animal control, $266,000. Can you explain that? Is that already earmarked for the animal control?
Yeah, that's not a new line item. We do that every year to transfer to support the animal control fund. It really is when it's in contingency. That just it's summarized under contingency. But if you look at the detail of the budget, you'll see it separated as an animal control transfer.
Further, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. And to you and Mr. St. Hilaire. First, publicly, I'd like to thank Mr. St. Hilaire for all the effort that he's put into supplying me with all of the extra questions that I've asked about the entire budget and spending time with me to go over these items. I thank you very much for that, David. In looking through this budget, and the mayor made a comment earlier, it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. I'm not sure that it applies to what I want to try to do here, but if it does, I apologize, Your Honor. At any rate, when I looked at the vacant budget funded items, the vacant positions, with benefits and everything included, it's about $3.2 million. And the thought occurred to me that if we could fund all of those positions at half with full value, because I don't think July 1st is going to go online. That may happen, but I don't think it'll happen.
We got like 15 seconds. I heard no one in the budget crunch. 15-second tapes. You're doing a good job. Please proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that would take $1.6 million out of the budget. And with the numbers that you and I have worked out through the last few months, just to be able to ballpark and put things into perspective, if you use the number of $800,000, moving the mill rate, a tenth of a mill, that comes out to about $10 per $100,000 of net net assessment on someone's property. So we have 1.6 million. That would be $20 per 100,000. So on a house like mine, $200,000 house, it would save our family $40 a year. Now it doesn't sound like a big well, but it's still $40 a year. And when the mayor has used the term we're on an unsustainable path, and I like that term because my house is on an unsustainable path. That if I project out 7 years, I'll be paying maybe sooner. $104 a week for taxes on my house. And if you were to walk up to our house and say, you look at all these numbers and that all makes sense. You look at the house and you go, I don't understand it. So that's kind of what's driving me here. So what I would then suggest, and this is going back to the mayor's comment, is if we could take, as those positions come online, if we could fund them out of the fund balance. And let's just go on the premise that at the end of the year, not everything is filled. We just backfill that money back, we just pass that back into the fund balance, shore that back up. And my thought would be, the following year, based upon what the fund balance would have been at the end of 2012, 2013, we make that adjustment in the taxes. Now, this may sound like a Rod Peter big ball kind of thing, but you don't know what's going to come online in the course of the year. So that's kind of where I'm thinking on this. Okay.
Can you explain that?
You got this? I got it. Okay. It was actually part of the last.
Okay, go ahead. You're fine. Go ahead. All right. So we have
I hope everybody followed that, but I want to say a good idea. Good idea. We currently do that. If you look at the personnel salary savings line, that's exactly what it does. It takes those funded positions and it offsets those funded positions with a negative. All right? So it reduces that budget, and then if you're looking at employee service benefit, it partially funds it. Now, those unbudgeted positions, those are completely struck out of the budget. That's a $2.5 million savings in total between salaries and benefits. Those positions are not going to be filled. The other ones that we talked about, those other 36 positions, those are only partially funded, not fully funded, but partially funded, because we do offset that with the personnel salary savings. We didn't really get into that too much this afternoon, but that's exactly what that does. It does exactly what you're talking about there, because we recognize the fact that those positions are not going to be filled on day one.
So, this is the part that I missed. Are we, if I look at the budget of $220 million, are there $3.2 million in that budget, in that $220 million?
If you add up all those personnel salary savings lines, you probably reduce it by maybe $1.5 million. Now, keep in mind, much of that is, we don't do a significant amount of reduction in police and fire, because we don't want to leave ourselves short.
It's a policy decision that I made.
It's a public safety decision.
And I fully am on board with that. I fully understand that, and I fully understand, because I've been beat up here for 3 years about not trying to touch the fund balance because it looks good when the credit bureau comes up. So, I'm up to speed on all of that. But it still leaves me a little uncertain about, if I look at a budget and it says, we want to tax you at $220 million, and you say, well, we're not taxing you at $220 million, we're taxing you at $218.5 million. So I'm confused with that.
I would just ask you to open up your budget and look at, police, for example, and you'll see the regular salary line, and underneath that, you'll see a personnel salary savings offset, which is a negative number. So you really have to look at the sum of the two to understand, that is actually, that's personnel salary savings is a reduction of their budget.
Right. So if you think of this way, Mr. Mayor, if you didn't do that, and you put the assumption everybody's going to be hired by July 1, you would be taxed at $221.5 million. That's how we got to 220, was by taking that reduction.
In summary, we do not fund our positions, all the vacant positions that we intend to fill. We do not fully fund.
We know we won't.
Period.
Hire everybody. We know that. So we make an assumption in the budget. That's why, if we were to do it straight and say, okay, every person in here is going to be completely funded, have insurance and everything else, you'd be 221.5.
And we started that, when the economy started getting difficult. We started that 3 years ago.
That was not always a practice.
Keep the tax rates
Not
down.
always a practice. So you're on. You're both in the right church. You're sitting at the right people.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Mr. Side.
Thank you, Your Honor. So basically saying that what Councilman Nero was getting at was something that makes sense and has not always been done, but is being done. I just want to highlight, I think it's about answering. If I understand this correctly, I'm just looking at page, for example, engineering department proposed operating budget on page 198. A line item that says personnel salary savings, and there's $70,001. That's what you're referring to. And so that $70,001 is not included in the overall budget. That is a reduction in the total amount of expenditures than revenues. And just to be clear, the $3.2 million that Councilman Nero spoke about to fund those 34 positions, or 29, whatever, 36 positions, you're saying that now, that personnel salary savings,
That's a number, that's what we really didn't get into in our conversation. So that was, as we're talking about it, we didn't really get into that discussion this afternoon now. Okay.
what I just want to show, I wrote down here, it said approximately 1.5 million is not in the budget because of this personal salary savings. And that's based on the scenario that Mr. Nero outlined. People understand that. It's
That's the kind of, Mr. Neal, that's kind of great thinking that we need. So, I'm glad you thought about the work you've done. Seeing that, Mr. Simon, for the second time.
Well, never yielded before.
Oh, I think you did, but it's your second
I
time.
asked the question.
You got the
Following on with what Mr. Nero said, and understanding that obviously it's difficult budgeting, and it's difficult for council members here with full-time jobs or part-time jobs and many other things going on in their life to, I don't have a question yet, but it's okay. It's especially difficult in tough economic times. It's easier for us when we have a lot of revenue coming in, when our investments are doing well and permits are doing well. We have a finite amount of resources, and we prioritize education, public safety, infrastructure, and this. In past years, I've expressed my concern with certain funding going to private or quasi-private, quasi-public entities, certain entities and within our city, regional entities. Also concerned with both union and non-unionized raises. And those have not always been popular positions to take, and some meetings have had texts to me that, why are you doing this to us? But while not popular, all the elected officials up here, the mayor and others, have an obligation to do what we each feel is best for our city. And setting policy and course of action going forward. There are obviously going to be times as we disagree and argue, and some people want Saudi to shut up, and I want other people to be quiet, but we don't. We listen, we debate, we disagree and debate, and that's not bad. It's really the heart of a democracy, and I apologize for getting too philosophical a bit here, but I think what's important here is being able to ask these questions, go through our budget, debate and disagree, and then leave it dice. Leave a meeting, understanding that we're all doing our best, even though we may have reasonable disagreements on how to get there. All that being said, and the comments that I made in the Government One Committee, I asked some questions about raises or mid-year adjustments. When I compare this year's current budget, or current salaries with non-unionized employees after hearing some discussion or statements at the public hearing, with the proposed budget, they look the same. I then went back to the online and posted budget, and compared those salaries to last year's approved budget, and they were different. There was some discussion in that, and the mayor explained that all very well in the Government One Committee, how those budget adjustments were made within existing appropriations and savings, and I apologize for misrepresenting your words. But what I stated at the meeting was I still had a concern with voting for, in this budget, for raises that I would not have voted for in last year's budget. I can't speak for others as to whether they feel the same way. And I know it's not a large amount of money, and I know some people may be upset, but given how tight things are, and with the potential for having to come up with other dollars possibly down the road for certain contingencies, I just can't support those current raises at this time. The people who deserve it, just like told teachers who said, I have 3 degrees, you don't think I deserve the salary? I'm not saying you don't deserve it, and there's a finite amount of money in order to provide these salaries. So with that, I would move to defund the non-union raises, with the exception of any increases in salary line items related to the change in classification, such as, I believe, change of classification, or because somebody was hired mid-year, that salary line item may have been lower and needs to be higher this year because it was paid throughout the entire year.
There's been a motion to take away the raises for the non-union employees. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Seconded, as made by Mr. Nero. Is there a discussion? Mr. Howard? And then Mr. Lee. Yes, you do. So I'll make the record show that Mr. Kern, for this particular part, actually, sorry, Mr. Kern, I recused himself. Mr. Gowsey.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have the utmost respect for my colleague, Mr. Sadi, but I certainly could not ever support the amendment that is being proposed currently to defund the non-union employees. And I'll base that on several factors, and I'd like to ask Mr. St. Clair if he can just verify some of my information for me. Mr. St. Clair, the raises total, mid-year raises total to the non-union employees, if I'm not mistaken, was in the area of about $80,000.
That's correct.
And when was how long did those employees, non-union, go without raises?
2009 and 10. That was the last, actually it was before that, 8, 9. That was the last fiscal year that the non-union got a raise. So I recently, you want me to expand upon that?
If you would.
The comparison between the raises, all the raises across the board, across the city, between different classes, right, and union, non-union. And since that time, since 2009 and 10, because that was the area in question, the non-union, got a raise this year. Well, that amounted to $80,000. But during that same period of time, the non-union got raises up to $2.5 million, equated to 2.5. And they got 3 raises during that time, and the non-union got 1 raise. The union got 7.5%, and the non-union got 2.75%. And that was
for 6 months period.
Yeah, a few months ago.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Moore. If I could just follow up with Ms. Lasker Warner. Lasker Warner, thank you. One of my concerns, and I wondered if you could verify it, how long do employees stay, non-union employees generally stay in employment when they start not receiving raises year after year? And do we have a risk or run a risk of losing employees by not offering raises if other places are being more competitive?
If other places are being more competitive, yes. When we're in the economy, we have to look to see if that's truly happening.
And do we occasionally have people come in and look at our non-union employees for their salaries comparable to other towns, municipalities, our size and budget size, and say, hey, you're on track or you're not on track? Or,
yes.
Okay. So my fear there, thank you. My fear there would be that we would just wind up dropping backwards so far that eventually someone would come in and say, look, you're not competitive, and you're not going to be able to stay competitive, and you're going to lose good people. And I like our non-union staff. I think that they do a tremendous job for a fair amount of pay, but I think there are some adjustments that can be made to them. And I think a lot of them do above and beyond, and I can start naming them, and I'm looking at a lot of them right here in this room tonight. And, I wouldn't want to lose you because I know that your time and your efforts go way beyond what you get paid for. And there's a dedication to the city that comes with that. And I'm happy that you got the mid-year raise. I'm glad that the mayor, Your Honor, could you tell me, how did you manage to squeak that out, by the way?
Well, thank you. I'm going to give you the hammer just in case there. I appreciate you asking that question. What had happened is, I think some of the non-union folks back there could attest to this. They went 4 years without a raise. At the same time, as Mr. Saylor was telling you, at the same time, most people on this dais voted for union contracts that gave raises. I just brought 3 contracts in front of you, and they all went through unanimously. And let me tell you what that means. Next year, these folks aren't getting a raise, but your union counterparts are. You approved $688,000 in raises for your union folks. And the quickest way you're going to turn non-union people into union people is keep waiting 4 years every time that they're doing an increase. So what did I do? I went back to them, I met with my management advisory team, and I said, look, you guys want raises? You got to find the money. You can't just find $80,000. You got to find me significant savings for me to fund the raises. And they did that. They came back in with several $100,000 worth of savings out of the current year budget. So I wanted to be clear to our taxpayers that they won't have to pay additional raise. But what I find ironic here is that we're having a discussion about that. When we just sailed 3 contracts through, everybody said no problem. We had a teacher's contract that didn't even come up here for a vote. Everybody voted not to take no action. $1.4 million in raises. I'm not even saying the teacher shouldn't get it. I'm a teacher, so if I ever go back there, I want my raise. Oh, I'm just kidding. But all sincerity, nobody said anything. It was okay then. And I think there's a real disparity in equity and how we treat people. And we have to be very careful. You're just asking for a lawsuit. That doesn't mean everybody should get a raise all the time. I don't believe municipal employment means you get a raise no matter what. And I have to say that in the past, I based raises on merit pay on the kind of job that the individual is doing. They didn't like that system, and I like that system. It's worked well here for the last 11 years. But I understand frustrations and concerns. I'm concerned about the escalating cost of government too. And part of the challenge that we have as a council, as the mayor, is that we live in the bluest of blue states. There's a rule and state statute for every single thing we do. The contracts you approved, I don't quarrel with the fact that you approved them, I would have voted for them too. Because if you go to arbitration, we're going to lose those arbitrations. And we're going to have to pay more raises. So I think that's part of a bigger issue that we really can't necessarily solve right here. But I think that what we did for the non-union people was fair, it was equitable. And again, we didn't program raises for next year. However, if they come back with $1 million worth of raises, $1 million worth of savings, because they've come up with some magical way of doing things, then we can certainly look at that. Mr. Levy, you have
Thank you, Your Honor. And there's not a whole lot I can add to what you've already said, except we're dealing with a $220 million budget. I would be more than happy to listen to a plan to save a few $1 million on this budget without running a risk of pushing people into an organized labor situation, which I know in the past is service here. And certainly those non-union people can do as they wish. I'm not saying I would prevent that from happening, but certainly in the overall scope of things, to even vote no against a budget of this magnitude on the basis of an $80,000 raise, it just doesn't make sense to me. I would be happier to listen to overtures on which would have taken place perhaps in committee or in private meetings with the finance director that would set out to reduce the budget a meaningful amount, not something that is tertiary. We approve grants here, and we fund those grants right and left with amounts of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here, basically, we're talking about chump change. And I just don't see where anybody could vote against an overall budget on the basis of $80,000.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. You're on the amendment, we're not on the main motion. So motion made, move the questions, or second? Second. Second, Mr. Hagershad. All in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition, raise your hand. So it will be Mr. Sadi, Mr. Muir, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Botello, and Mr. Machinist. At this time, we're on to the amendment of defunding the raises. All in favor of defunding the raises for the non-union staff, signify by saying aye. Aye. All in favor? Okay. I confused myself there. All opposed, signify by saying nay. Nay. Okay, well, the ayes raise your hand this time. Okay, that would be Mr. Rotella, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, Mr. Discussion, Mr. Sal. The motion fails. We're back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Sal, you've had the floor twice. Any other discussion? Mr. Lee?
Your Honor, I would make a motion that we move the question. I think everybody's had sufficient time, either in committee or on the floor here, to discuss the main motion.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Vandershot. All in favor of moving the question signify by saying aye. Aye. In the negative, raise your hand.
Nay.
Mrs. T, Mr. Skaz, Mr. Rotella, Mr. Kern, you're back on the floor. And your vote on moving the question, Mr. Kern?
No.
Mr. Kern's in the negative. Let's see here. Let's try this again. Mrs. T, Mr. Skaz, Mr. Rotella, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, and Mr. Sal. And Mr. Kern and Mrs. Hammond. 9, motion passes 11-9. This time around the main motion. All in favor of item 12, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, nays, raise your hand, please. Okay, then Mr. Rotella, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nero, and Mr. Sal. Madam Clerk, item 14. I'm sorry, 13.
Item 13, ordinance. An ordinance appropriating $3 million for public improvements in the 2012-2013 capital budget and authorizing the issuance of 3 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriations and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With your pleasure, Council. Mr. Knapp.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to receive the communication and improvement ordinance appropriating $3 million for public improvement projects in the 2012-2013 capital budget and authorizing the issuance of $3 million bonds of the city to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose.
Second. Made second by Mr. Vandershot. Discussion related to item 13. Mr. Shinichi.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to split the question.
Second. Motion made to divide the question. In what way, Mr. Shinichi?
Individually. There'll be 4 motions for each item separate. Yeah, we vote on each one separate.
So you're suggesting we vote on replacing the highway department equipment as one item, paving Greenwich Road is 2, city buildings roof repairs 3, and Charles Laboratory pavilion repairs as 4. Is that your motion? Was there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Perkins. Discussion about dividing the question. Okay, all those in favor of dividing the question, why don't you raise your hands? Mr. Rotella, Mr. Shinichi, Mr. Perkins, and Mr. Snyder. Motion fails. At this time, we're back to the main motion discussion. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. I've been on record a couple times before stating my displeasure with using long-term funding to pay for equipment, police cars, fire trucks, other types of vehicles, long-term, and also having to, I think they should be in a department's budget, and also using a bond to finance those things. I would, parade folks up, but I know what kind of response I get. I probably hear that some of the equipment that's being used now is probably older than me, which that could be the case because it's not that old. I'd also probably hear that, for example, I get a home sold to me by a real estate agent. 30 years I go back to her, 20 years I go back, I say, my house fell down. She said, yeah, but you got a really great rate. All right,
Same thing here. The equipment that we're buying really doesn't last as long as the amount of funding, so I think that's why it's a good idea to have broken some of these items out. But I do know that, a lot of this highway equipment is important, not great work, so it really should be broken out. In addition to that, I've said that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Other discussion related to these Mr. Sheen?
Thank you, Your Honor. During the public hearing, the meeting was mentioned about the Child Arts Authority ownership of that facility. Can the Corporation Council give us the actual owner of that building?
Ownership of authority properties in the city.
So if the building's on the city property, it's on West of Connecticut.
It's on state property. It's not West Coast property, it's state property.
State property, it's state. So the state owns the property, but we own the actual building.
We own the assets. Including an acre and a half. Any other discussion? Mr. Piscopo?
Thank you, Your Honor. Through the chair to Finance Director. Sorry. Where do we stand with bonding right now with the part of the city?
Which way? Where do we stand as far as bonding?
What are we looking at as far as bonds now? Where are we?
Where do we stand as far as our bonded indebtedness, Mr. St.
Well, our rating is just about as high as you can get. It's AAA, where we go out for bonding, which means we get an excellent rate. We just about issued all that we have authorized to issue. And just, if I may, a point of clarification in regards to Councilman Vitello's to the statement that was made earlier, Perkins. By statute, but we cannot issue a bond longer than the useful life of any item on there. So, for example, a roof may have a 20-year useful life. Our bonds only go out for 20 years, by the way. So the roof may have a longer useful life, but the bond can only go out for 20 years. A truck may have a 7 to 10-year useful life. So we can only bond out for 7 or 10 years. If it's any other type of equipment, we have to go out for as long as the useful life of the equipment. So, to say that we're going out beyond, we're still paying on this equipment longer than, its useful life, or as long since we've disposed of it, is not an accurate statement. So what we do is, when we're issuing these bonds, we are issuing serial bonds. So that's the point of clarification. We just smooth out the payments over a certain period of time. We're winding down all the amount that we're issuing. We'll go out again this year for approximately $15 million and some band. That'll be the long-term portion, which is bonds. We'll go out for some bands for probably about $5 million or less, and that'll just about do it. All right, and that's why, if you notice in your bond packet, you notice that we peak out as far as our percentage around next year. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to thank David for that explanation. It's one thing to ask your descendants to pay for something that they're going to use, like a park perhaps, or a lake or something like that. That 50 or 75 years down the road, they're still using it. It's obviously a very different thing to ask them to pay for things they're no longer using and really dispose of. So thank you. I didn't know that.
Thank you, Mr. Otello. Further discussion? Seeing none, then Mayor. Secret. You want to resubmit the motion on this one? Just for a moment. All right, you want me to leave? All right, we're gonna take a 2-minute break. Shift to the table. Okay, we'll be back in session. We have a motion on the floor, and I guess everybody, that was like nothing, so don't worry. I just want to be clear that when Mr. Shinichi moved, I'm just going to share this with our discussion. When Mr. Shinichi moved to divide the question, it is the sense of the body to make the determination that the question should be divided. So in this case, we did the vote, was overwhelming, and the question should not be divided. So just want to be clear. You say, Mr. Pinter, making sure that I could move it's not easily divisible. And just for future reference, not to belabor the point, if the ordinance was divided that way, you would have to go back and look at it. Just so.
It hasn't been tested that much, but since the body voted, they decided the question of whether.
So, I just don't want you guys to think there's any secrets. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, any other discussion related to Act 14? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Nays, raise your hand. Motion passes. Item 14.
Ordinance sewer rates as of July 1st, 2012.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to recommend the adoption of the proposed amendments to Code of Ordinance Section 16-4 and Section 16-32.
Made and seconded by Mr. Seabury. Any discussion as it relates to item 14? Discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ordinance with regard to minimum use charges, come up several times. Public brought up to the council. I have no question to direct that to.
Mr. Agrawal, he's sitting in the back, he's wearing pink.
Come up here tonight.
David is a lot more familiar with the sewer rates.
Mr. David.
My question is just the basis for it, not saying it's right or right or wrong necessarily, but just to understand it a little bit.
Your question, the flat rate fee, is that really what your question is?
Let's refer to this minimum use charge, and flat rate fee, whatever.
Well, this rate structure has been in place for quite some time, so we do have a cost of service study which we are presently embarking on, which we will look at rate design and rate structure. So I really, profiles before me set this up. So all I can say is we can look into that and I do the cost of service study. But the purpose of a flat rate fee is that ultimately you want all customers to be metered. So if someone isn't metered, you have to establish a flat rate fee. Mr. Gucker's question I did hear, and we can look into that.
My problem, the way it was explained to me at one time, not in its exact context, but similar to the public utility and state level context, is there's a certain cost to the delivery of the service, notwithstanding whether you use a gallon or 100 gallons. So to capture that cost, rather than having a different rate, let's say on your electric bill, you have your service provider fee, or I use the right nomenclature, and then you have your wattage fee, how much you actually use. It's been explained to me that it's something similar to that. You have to capture the cost of the infrastructure and the delivery, and then you tack onto that the use. So it gets rolled in if you use more than the minimum charge or flat rate, whatever you want to say. But if you don't use more than that, you pay that cost of the actual provision of the public utility.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there's a minimum fixed fee.
I should ask myself the question. I'm just kidding. I just want to make sure that I was understanding it correctly.
Well, your explanation was correct.
But the review that you're kind of doing is going to look at that.
It's going to look at our rate structure. I mean, that may help answer the question previously posed.
You know, I'm just going to interject here. Anytime we do these rate structure fees, they're never pretty. Because those studies are never pretty, and when I present them to the council, you're not going to want to see what they're asking for, because we are so historically low on sewer and water.
The reason I bring that up is we can look at that specific topic of how you establish a flat rate fee.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Rotella.
I direct this to you, Your Honor. If we just run through this, I'm looking at a $10 increase in Section A. I'm looking at a $100 increase in section 1A, a $30 increase in section 1B, and maybe a $140 increase in section 1B. The reason I bring it up is because with these strike-throughs and whatnot, they've left sometimes $1,000 in script, and they've done a strike-through. So in some instances, it looks like we've gone from $750 to $1,700 or $1,800, but that's not the case. We're actually, these increases are, I don't want to say they're insubstantial, but they don't appear to be as large as they do at a cursory examination. So I am correct on that, the first one's a $10 increase, the second one is it looks like a slightly less than $100 increase. The third one's about $30, and the fourth one's around $140, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor of item 14, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Mr. Perkins,
Abstain.
and Mr. Scott abstains. Madam Clerk, item 15, Mr. Scott's about. Sorry, Joe.
And 15, ordinance, water rates as of July 1st, 2012.
What's your pleasure, council? Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to accept the communication and adopt the ordinance establishing the quarterly non-metered rates for the use of water, which rate shall be in effect for all bills rendered on or after July 1, 2012, $279.22 per unit.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Negrishev. Is there any discussion related to this item? None, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Mr. Scott abstains respectfully, and Mr. Perkins votes no. Okay, Mr. President, department reports.
Your Honor, I make a motion to waive the reading of the department reports, as all members have copies are on file. Human Assistance Office.
Motion made, seconded by Mr. Negrishev. Discussion on the department reports. Mrs. Stanley.
I was just wondering if Mr. Stillman can elaborate on what's going on Pleasant Street.
Pleasant
How
Street.
we're handling it. Doesn't sound pleasant. Doesn't sound pleasant.
I was made aware of the situation at Pleasant Street Monday morning when I came into work. Apparently the complaint was several cars blocking up the road, noise, a lot of people, even a complaint of a hot dog vendor who was even there. So I learned about this Monday morning coming into work. So it's causing stress, obviously, in the neighborhood. I haven't received complaints about this property in around 2 years. So, not that it's a new occurrence, but I haven't had a complaint about this property in 2 years, other than the occasional front yard parking, smaller things. So, the next question I assume you might ask is what can the unit do about it, what can the police department do about it? I'll be meeting with the property owner to discuss the burden that it's causing on the neighborhood and figure out a way to make it not happen again. Certainly, hot dog vendors, that's for sure. I'll be there this weekend as well to follow up and check it out to make sure that it's not happening. Members of the council, the mayor, other department heads, other employees, several residents have asked me, what can the city do about this? What can the union do about this? What can the police department do about this? There isn't an ordinance against this type of get-together. When there's illegal parking, we can tow vehicles, we can ticket vehicles, we can have vehicles moving. If there's a noise ordinance, the noise is too high, certainly the police can be called and break the party up. But for continual get-togethers at some of these residences, I'm sure we'd all love to be able to put an ordinance together where we could limit this type of activity. And I would encourage
your group to help empower my department, police department, or any other departments that we figure out a way where we can curb this negative activity because it's causing a major quality of life disruption for many neighborhoods in our town.
You said that this happened on Pleasant Street 2 years ago?
The last time I received
Was it the same house? Was it the same?
It was the same house.
And so what did you do 2 years ago that stopped it from happening, and now it's happening again?
You go there, you talk to the tenants, you talk to the property owners to say, hey, come on, look around, you're causing disturbance to the neighborhood, neighbors are complaining, they're not happy with you. And many property owners and tenants are respectful of that, and many just simply don't care.
One of the houses in question, Mrs. Stanley, are 5 Pleasant and 7 Pleasant. I will tell you that one of the best strategies we've used is get a hold of the landlord. We call the landlord into City Hall. You sit down with them and you kind of go over the activity. Oftentimes you're not aware, or if you go straight to the tenants, sometimes there's a language challenge, sometimes folks are transient, they may not live there in a couple of months. But going to the landlord to say, look, I know this is really important. The other piece is that's why I came to you guys with that ordinance on light that I want to beef up a little bit. I think it's 7 is in significant disrepair. There's grass overgrown. It's house qualified. So part of this would be to, but there's a landlord collecting the rent for these folks every month. So obviously they've got to put some money back into the property. So I'm sure Mr. Stone also plans on being the landlord.
One more question. So when they called and left your message on Sunday, the resident called and left a message on a Sunday, and there was nobody around to respond on Sundays?
We did, actually. I got an email on Sunday as well. I forwarded it to Mr. Stillman. She had your cell phone number, so she called you. The cruiser did go out there, but they didn't report the kind of activity that was being reported to us. Now, it could have just been that they got there too late and everybody had already left, but we did send a police cruiser out there.
And a police officer also did, at that time, not he wasn't there any longer. But again, our cars were, at that time, legally parked. And there really wasn't much else the officers do to...
I think we got there.
I know if there's cars parked on the street, the police officers can ticket that for blocking the streets, because I know I'm in business. And if my truck, if my truck is on the street, I will get a ticket or be asked to hire police officers for that sort of, for being there for 10 minutes. So, I mean, there's a lot of things already on the books that we can use, I think, to curtail this activity.
I think in this case, the cop just got there too late. I think by the time we responded, most people had left. So we're a few cars legally parked. You could drive up and down. We could get a fire truck through. I think we just missed it. So I think we got to put this on the radar for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think everybody should have the right to do their property.
Absolutely. Well, do it. Respectfully.
Absolutely.
Mr. Cole?
What would take the I can see having a meeting in yard 1, but this becomes a weekly thing. That's a
Yeah, we went down that road. I ended up being deposed about that for about 3 hours. So here's what I can tell you is that the most effective tool we found is to meet directly with the owner of the house. We haven't done that yet here. And then escalate our enforcement, right? So I think we have enough tools in our toolbox now to get on top of this. Last time we had a major outbreak of these kinds of recurring group activities, we were able to work with the community, to work with our property owners, to get most of them shut down. There were maybe 2 at the end that they just wouldn't listen to anybody. We turned those over to the chief. The chief put together a mini task force, and we got them shut down. Not to say that you can't enjoy your property, you can, but if you can't enjoy your property like that, just black and white. Everybody else is trying to say. So let's just see there.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to publicly recognize Leo Noel and his department. He came to my neighborhood with some issues that neighbors had, and I think several times to my knowledge, through his guidance, he was able to rectify the situation that could have gone completely out of hand. And so I just simply like to thank the public. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you. Mr. Seaver, any other discussion of the monthly reports? Mr. Gall.
Thank you. If I could just sort of a little off track, I just want to say thank you to the council for the great job they did. The meetings were attended almost flawlessly, and we appreciate that. And I want to just thank David, the mayor, David's staff for a tremendous job and the work that they do to put the budget together for the city this coming year. Thank you.
Never easy to ask for greater contributions, but I think we present as tight as we possibly can. Any other discussions on the department reports? Then I'll try your minds to the second to the closing. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Objection, motion carries unanimously. We have, executive session. Okay. You want to go back and do that? You want to clarify?
Sorry, to that one.
We just want to clarify that Mr. Seabury's motion, which was to amend a whole series of the code because the rates are affected throughout the code. So, Mr. Seabury, if you can just read this off for us.
Just to clarify, Mr. Seabury's motion referenced one section, there are four more. They should all be captured in order to adopt the ordinance.
Okay.
If I understand this correctly, Les, you want me to...
A little louder, but all you're doing is you're, in addition to amending the first
What I already said, you want me to repeat it before?
in addition, I amended.
In addition to my pre-stated motion, I'd also like to include the approval of codes 21-46, 21-47, 21-48, 21-49.
Okay, the department reports have been accepted. We've got two add-on items. So I'll entertain a motion to add on, Mr. Cabo.
I'd like to make a motion at this time that we add item number 17 as an add-on, which is appointment of independent auditors, and item number 18, which we will retire into executive session for the purposes of discussion of the 13 acres real property.
Second was made and seconded. All those in favor of item 17, which is appointment of independent auditors, and item 18, which is a discussion of acquisition of sale of real property, 30 acres on Old Bridge Road. Signify by saying aye. Aye. In opposition to those two items that have been added. Just before we go to 17, for the executive session, Mr. Volpe, I need you to stay. Can you stay for the executive session, please? Mr. Tamala, can you stay? Mr. Shepard, your legal staff, Mr. St. Hilaire, and actually I'm going to need Mr. Ferguson as well. Okay, in the executive session. No, you can't. And Mr. I think we're good. Any, okay, item 17.
Appointment of independent to Honorable Mark Fountain from David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance. Once again, it is time for the City of Danbury to consider the appointment of its auditors to perform the city audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012. Previously, the city signed a contract with Danbury and Poland to perform the audit for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2010, with the option exercisable by the city of auditing its financial statement for each of the 4 subsequent fiscal years. McGadry and Poland has performed the independent audit/accounting services for the city over the last 12 years and has done an outstanding job. As such, the City Council is respectfully requested to approve the reappointment of McGatry and Pullman as the city independent auditors for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012, as required by the city charter and the state statutes. Please feel free to contact me should you require any additional information.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, Council? Mr. Levy?
Your Honor, I make a motion that we receive the communication, take the option of renewal as outlined in the communication of appointment of independent officers.
Motion made, seconded by Mr. Curry. Any discussion about the appointment of independent auditors? It's simply an extension of the existing contract, again, exercising the right. Seeing none, then I'll try to remind all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. We're going to move into executive session at this point. Department heads, I haven't called up the hall. Just so you know, the record, they send it off.